Morning, First Baptist Simpsonville Upstate Church. Oh, y'all knew better than that. My 8:45 gave me more than that. So good to see y'all this morning. Hey, Brian said earlier, my name's Corey. I get to hang out over at our Harrison Bridge campus and preach there most Sundays, and it's my privilege to be back here with you guys. I was originally hired to be a student director, was in that role for a little while, and so this was like base camp for me for a good amount of time of my time here at Upstate Church, and loved that time. And so as I knew I was coming back today, this date has really been circled on my calendar, but not just because I wanted to come back and see you guys, but for a number of reasons. One, we just saw what happened at middle school beach camp, and I'll tag on to the numbers Brian gave you just a second ago. We saw 11 first-time decisions last week of that. Yeah, that's reason to celebrate. 11 students who went from death to life. Man, that's worth it right there. Also along those same lines, it's a big day. Brian mentioned it, Fountain Inn Interest meeting at 4 p.m. Let me highly encourage you to be a part of that meeting. Even if you say, Corey, I'm good, I'm not going, I'm planning here, cool. But you can go and figure out how you can specifically pray and encourage that campus. I can tell you this, I'm a resident of Fountain Inn. God is doing some mighty things already, all throughout that area. Even in Fountain Inn High School, on my evangelism side of my evangelism role I get to go into a lot of schools and prime the pump for us to see what Jesus might do. And I can tell you this, not only Fountain Inn High School, but a lot of our schools in and around here, man, Jesus is on the move here. And so, hey, 4 p.m. today, yeah, let's go ahead and give it up for that. 4 p.m. today, you should be in that room, if for nothing else, to learn how you can pray specifically for what God's going to do in Fountain Inn. Also along those same lines, you saw the baptisms up there. I tell Harrison Bridge every time it rolls around, it is my favorite Sunday of the month. And here's why, especially today. My neighbor just got baptized up there, and that is, for me, one of the most exciting things. Like, you can tell, I'm hopped up on caffeine, and now that, I'm like at a level 10 out of 10 here. Like, I'm ready to roll. But not only that, I got some guys from a team that I invest in, our Hillcrest football team, that are here for the first time. And so I'll tell you what, I was wide awake at 5:30 this morning, ready to roll and ready to see what the Lord would do. And so I'm so excited. But also on a more personal note, I'm excited for this weekend and today. My mom was in the last service with my stepdad, and so they got to come, they got to hear. And Anna Grace asked me this question this week when she knew that my mom, she calls her Dee Dee, when she knew Grandma was coming. She said, Daddy, does Dee Dee have dollars for me? I looked at her and I said, what do you mean? She said, does Dee Dee have dollars for me? And we went through this 2 or 3 times, and finally I figured it out. I was like, oh, is she going to give you money? She said, yeah, is she? And I said, I don't know, you got to take that up with her. I know my granddaddy gave me money, but that's between you and her. And so when a grandparent comes, maybe it's the same for you, they will bring dollars, as my daughter says. And she's really big into dollars right now at 5. Like, dollars are a really big thing because she's figured out I can buy stuff with it. Now, she has no concept of money or math. She just knows that in her piggy bank that I counted the other week for, she has $15 in there. In her mind, that's $1 million. And she thinks she can buy everything that she wants. And so what often happens every couple of weeks when I count her money for her, we'll give her $1 or $2 each week. Inflation has hit the Watson household hard. So when she makes her bed or does good things, we'll give her $1, maybe $2 if it's been a really good week. And so she'll say, Daddy, I want to go spend my money. I said, cool, let's go. So we end up on a particular store's baby aisle, where I spend half an hour of my time. And we walk up and down that baby aisle. In fact, she did it last night with my mom. Went to the same baby aisle. I know this baby aisle by heart. I could see it in my dreams. Literally, I've spent an untold amount of time on this aisle. And without fail, every time that she gets on that aisle, she'll look at something that she doesn't have the money for, $30, $40, and she'll say, Daddy, can I get this? And I said, sorry, baby, you don't have enough for that. And then the follow-up question is, well, can you help me? I said, I'll give you like $5, but we ain't getting the $40 now. And so I'll take her and I'll guide her back towards the cheaper end, right? With $15, you're not gonna buy a whole lot of baby. Y'all, listen, you may not have a little girl. The stuff they have for baby dolls is insane. Literally, we own a toilet for the baby doll. A toilet and a pack and play. I mean, 18-year-old me would look at 38-year-old me and be like, what in the world? I'm saying the same thing. But here we are, we're sitting on this aisle, and I got her down to the cheaper end of it, and there's like little baby bottles, fake milk, fake orange juice, whatever. And I said, you can buy this, $4, $6, this is where we want to camp out. And I said, but here's the thing. If you save your money, you can get the $30 or $40 down the road, and Daddy will help you. And you already know what happens. She don't want to wait. There's no concept of waiting in a 5-year-old's mind. She said, no, I want that. I said, Anna Grace, you already have 10 baby bottles. We don't need another. No, but I want that. Because she has to walk out with something in her hand, right? That money's burning a hole in her pocket. And so we walk out, we have an orange juice and we have a milk baby bottle to add to the collection there. Now, why do I even share this story with you? Here's why. Because I believe with the text we're going to talk about today in James chapter 5, you can go and be turning there, first 6 verses, that what we're going to talk about today, we are a lot like my little girl on that proverbial baby aisle. And what I mean is this. We're going to talk about money today. We're going to talk about giving. You say, oh, it's one of those sermons. Yes, it is. Because I believe if we get this right, man, the mission of Jesus in the Upstate, as much as it's already taking off, it's going to kick up another notch or two, I believe. And especially in my role as evangelism director, there's nothing that wakes me up more than the thought of, man, what would it take to reach the Upstate of South Carolina? Because I am a firm believer, we reach the Upstate of South Carolina, we reach the world. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But here's what I think is a great danger to those of us who know Jesus in this room, is that we'll stand on the proverbial baby aisle and we'll see the bigger picture and we'll know that we should reach people for Jesus. And we know we want to move the needle for the kingdom of God. But we'll still choose the little baby bottles at the cheap end of the aisle. Why? Because we value the trinkets and treasures selfishly over the will of God in my life. And I'm not saying this just for you. I fight it in my life too. That I know what God has called me to. I know how God has called me to use my resources, my time, my money, my investments. And I shouldn't say almost every time, but a lot of times my sinful heart wants to choose this world over that. If that's you, I hope and pray today that God will do a work in your heart. I'll give you a little bit of background of the text we're getting ready to read here. James chapter 5. James is writing to Christians, but he's writing in this passage about non-Christians. So he's writing to Christians about non-Christians and their riches. And so it's actually got something for both crowds here today. As he writes to Christians, James' overarching theme of the letter, the whole letter, is to call for a single-minded devotion of every inch of our lives to Jesus. That is, if you were to read from James chapter 1 to the end of the letter, and you say, sum it up in one sentence, the summary sentence I would use is James says, it's all Jesus's. Every aspect of your life, if you're a Christian, should be given to Jesus. There are no nooks, no crannies, no corners, no skeletons in the closet that we hold back. And James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6 is a continuation of that. Now, specifically in this text, he writes a twofold purpose to the Christians. The reason why he mentions riches here. Number one, it's a warning. He'll give a picture of what it looks like for the non-Christian to use riches in a bad way, in a terrible way. And he warns the Christian, don't fall into that temptation. Why? Because back then, most of that congregation that he's writing to is extremely poor. In some of them's lives, they probably don't know where their next meal is coming from. And so you could see how easy it would be to look at the riches of the Roman Empire and say, man, I really want some of that. Man, that could really change everything for me. And James says, don't do it. Don't go down that road. It's destructive. The second side of that is not only is it a warning, but it's also an encouragement. Again, he's writing to the majority of the church being poor Christians, and he's saying, though you suffer now, though you don't have the riches, though you may not know where your meal is coming from, a better day is coming in eternity with Jesus. Hold tight, hold fast. And so that's the background that we see here. Look with me as we read James chapter 5. James writes, come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. It's quite the text for a Sunday morning. James starts this passage in verse 1 the same way he started last week's passage that we looked at. He says, come now. Now, this is not a gentle calling to, hey, let's just talk this out. This is actually a rebuke among those who may be straying into using riches and wealth in the wrong way. He says, come now, you who are rich. Again, these are non-believers that he's talking about. He says, you who are rich, you need to weep and to howl, to cry out. Why would he say this? Because his point here, as he'll make again later in the passage, is this, is that this is as good as it gets. If you sit in here this morning and you don't know Jesus, this right now is as good as it gets. It's all downhill from here. I hate to be the bearer of bad news there, but what he is saying here is that, man, this is all you can hope for in this moment. So enjoy it, is essentially what he's saying. But there's a bigger call here, a call to see that, man, there's so much more than what this world has to offer. So he calls them to weep and to howl because, man, it only goes downhill from here. Verse 2, here's why. He shows them the short-sightedness of basing your life on riches and wealth and having a legacy and a mover and a shaker in and of this world. Verse 2, he says, three things, you'll notice here, three things that were the mark of ancient Near Eastern wealth. Number one, riches. So this would be money that we would think about. He says, your riches have rotted. Number two, your garments, so clothing. So a mark of wealth in the old church here in the first century would have been, what type of clothes do you wear? Now, this wasn't brand name logo, but it was the type of fabric, silk, linen, if you will. In fact, James has already talked about this back in chapter 2 for the sin of partiality, the sin of favoritism. And he says that when people would walk into the church, they were guilty because they would look at the guy with linen, with purple colors on, a mark of wealth at this time, and they would say, hey, you get the VIP seats up here. But somebody would walk in with clothes that did not reflect that, and they would look at him and say, you get the cheap seats in the back. And so these people understood that clothing, garments, were a sign of wealth. He says they are moth-eaten. And then he says, your gold and silver have corroded. Now you can go back to almost every single society, and how do they build wealth? It's on gold and silver. What will you find in Fort Knox in the United States of America? Gold bar upon gold bar upon gold bar. Our economy is built off of it. Gold and silver. Why? Because these are seen at their purest form as incorruptible. That is, if anything in the world can bring you value, guaranteed value, it is gold and silver. But notice what James says here. He says they are corroded. So wait. Does James just not understand the properties of gold and silver? Because they can't corrode, right? But what he says is even the most sure thing in this world, the most sure thing in terms of riches on the day when Jesus comes back will leave you wanting because it will not be enough. The most sure thing that societies and countries and governments are built off of, it fades away. It does not deliver on the promise that it has promised you in light of eternity. Yes, it may deliver you now, here and now in this moment, but there's a bigger picture in play here. Not only that, he continues on from verse 2 to verse 3. He says, not only do these things overpromise and underdeliver, but actually they're evidence against you on the last day. That there is a last day coming, yes, for Christian and non-Christian when Jesus comes back. And when Jesus comes back, we will all give an accounting. Now, for the Christian, your salvation is signed, sealed, and delivered. It's a finished work. You don't have to worry about, am I in heaven or not? Because you know Jesus as your Savior. But you still have to give an accounting for how you use his resources. For the non-Christian, he is saying how you use your riches in a very poor way right now is actually stacking the evidence against you, of which you have no satisfactory answer to get out of. That is a hopeless cause. And he sums it up in a good way, lack of a better word there. He says, it will eat your flesh like fire. That is, God would look at me if I'm not a follower of Jesus and say, hey, you don't know Jesus, but how'd you use your resources? Oh, well, I bought these garments. I got these riches. I got this gold. I got the silver. Not a satisfactory enough answer. And I would be condemned to an eternity separated from him, the lake of fire called hell. And the crazy thing about all this gathering of riches for the non-Christian, this is the mind-blowing thing to me. They didn't need them. They were already wealthy. They already had enough garments, riches, gold and silver. A lot of commentators have pointed out they were just hoarding wealth. And it was just laying to the side, not being used. It was useless to them. That's the danger in pursuing worldly riches. It never is enough. You've seen it just like I've seen it, right? Oh, if I can just get this pay raise, or if I can just get in this house, or if I can just get this or that. Does it ever stop? No. Because once I get there, what do I want? Something else. It is a beast that continuously has to be fed, and it can never find itself satisfied. It's a dangerous game to play for the Christian and the non-Christian. Now from verses 4 through 6, James makes note here of the outworking of this, because you may be sitting there saying, okay, yeah, I know riches of this world won't last, but is it really that bad, Corey? Is it really that bad? Notice as we walk through verses 4 through 6, how riches corrode the moral compass of the individual. To put it another way, how it brings you to places you never thought you would go in terms of sin, in terms of bad decisions. Pursuing riches, is it really that bad? Actually, it is, as James makes clear. He says, not only are you hoarding riches that you don't need, but now you're defrauding the day laborers who cut your fields, who take in your harvest. So there was a big separation between the wealthy landowners that we're talking about, the rich, and the day laborers. They would have been probably extremely poor. They would have been highly dependent on the day wages that they worked for, so they would work all day, get paid at the end of the day, and they needed these to live, to sustain an existence. We know this from ancient Near Eastern culture that, hey, they needed to be paid almost every single day. Why? Because they can't put food on the table otherwise. And so what the rich have done is that they've withheld their wages, and so that they can get richer and have riches they don't even need, and they have defrauded the one who may not even live to see the next day because his wages have been held back. This again is taking you places you never thought you would go. James says later on, he says, you're actually guilty of murder. Why? Because you're bringing them to the brink of starvation. And on top of that, these rich landowners, what they would do is they would look at their poor day laborers and they would say, oh, well, Corey has this. I'm going to take him to court. And when I take him to court, he doesn't have proper representation because he's poor and he can't afford it. And I'm going to strip away every last cent he has. This is why James says in verse 6, he does not resist you. But notice here, there's the encouragement that he writes to those. Maybe you sit in here and say, Corey, I don't know where my next meal's coming from. Corey, I don't know. I'm suffering in terms of wealth. I don't have a lot. What is there for me? James makes note here. For the one, I would say, the one who knows Jesus, God hears your cries. If you sit in here and you are suffering today, what we're told is that God hears the cries of his suffering people. You see this in chapter 5 of James. You can go back to the Old Testament. The Israelites, when they sat in 400 years of slavery, God's people cried out, and what we're told is God heard and God moved and acted. God is in the business of hearing those who are on the fringes, of those suffering, of those who do not have enough, of those who are pushed down in this life. God sees you, God hears you, and he is moving and acting. It may not be on your timeline that you want. It may not be the way that you want, but what we're told is that God is responding to your plight. And that if nothing else changes in this world, there is a better day coming. And that better day is eternity with Jesus if you know him. So at the end of the day, what do we do with this? Great, Corey, I now know about wealthy landowners and day laborers who are being defrauded. What does this mean for you and me? Well, here's what we find overarchingly in this passage. For Christians, wise Christians in this passage are called to make eternal investments. Wise Christians are called to make eternal investments. And at least the 2 points here, 2 application points from the negative. We're going to get this picture from this passage of things that Christians should not do. The first is this. We see that foolish Christians make bad investments. Foolish Christians make bad investments. So we said James is writing about non-Christians here, but he's warning the Christians, don't go down this road. It's a dangerous game to play. It'll snowball very quickly there for you. What does a bad investment look like for a foolish Christian? It looks like this. And it seems harmless, especially in the southern Bible belt of our country, right? I've seen this play out in my life more times than I care to admit, just full disclosure. I will see the plan of God. I will see the will of God to know him and to make him known, to go and make disciples of all nations. I will see ministries that need time, talents, and resources. I will see places in the Upstate Church First Baptist Simpsonville areas where I need to give sacrificially so that the mission can advance. And I will look at all of those things and I will say, hey, God, I actually want this over there. Somebody else will give. Somebody else will sacrifice. It's a big church. They'll give. I don't have to worry about that. And it seems harmless, but it's actually foolish and unwise. Because what I'm doing then is I am not investing in eternal things or eternal realities, if you will, or eternal return on investments. I'm investing in what Corey wants that will fade, that will corrode, that will be moth-eaten, and on the last day be evidence against me. How can I look at God on that last day and say, hey, God, I stewarded your resources wisely when I choose myself every single time that my heart is given the chance? Foolish Christians make unwise investments, make bad investments. You say, well, what is a good investment then? Maybe you realize, hey, I've chosen me. And we all have. We all have full transparency. What does a good investment look like for a Christian? It's that which moves the needle for the kingdom. It's that which moves the needle for Jesus. It's that which sees people come from death to life. Case in point, middle school camp last week. Our church supports it. 11 people coming from death to life. And who knows how much fruit in the weeks and months and years to come. Lives that will be changed forever. That is an eternal investment. The team I lead to Cuba this Saturday, a place that is economically upside down and politically is just a crazy place to be right now. Yet we get to go in there and to invest in countless lives and to share the message of Jesus, upon which we'll probably never see the fruit on this side of the coin in this life, but it is an eternal investment. What does this look like for you? Is choosing the will of God and how I spend my time, my talents, and my resources so that Jesus can be made much of. Here's what it's looked like in our life recently. When we lived in Newberry, served down there for 7 years, First Baptist Newberry, loved our time there. We got ready, when we moved there, they said, you need to buy a house. And I said, say what? I'd never purchased a house before. I just knew it was a lot of money. So I quickly figured out that after that, we need to buy a house and I'm gonna owe my life to somebody essentially, right? And so we started looking for houses. And in that time, that context, they had hired me to be a student and a college pastor. And you know, we saw some inroads with student ministry, but the college ministry, when I started, it was one student and that was the pastor's son. That was our college ministry. And we sat there and we're like, well, how are we gonna reach this college? Because the college down there is not particularly fond of conservative Baptist pastors coming in and talking about Jesus. So I didn't have a lot of access. So what we did is I looked at Melody, and I've told her this with every house that we've owned, right? We'll walk in the house we're thinking about buying, and she'll say, hey, what do you think of it? And I'm like, it looks good. That's the wrong answer, apparently. All right, you need to give a little more back. But I told her, every time we look at a house, I'm like, Mel, there are like 2 or 3 things that matter to me. Are my girls happy, my wife, my daughter, and yes, my dog? If all 3 are happy, we're good. If I got a little land to go out there, that's cool. Outside of that, I have no idea what I want in a house. But here's what we found. As we started to look, I found one thing that was clear that I wanted in this house. That we would find a place that was nestled up against that college campus if I couldn't get access so that we can make a kingdom-sized indention for Jesus. Now, Melody may have had other reasons why I bought that house. It probably looked good to her and all that. And I grew to appreciate it. But the primary reason in my mind why we purchased that house is so that we could host college Thursday night Bible studies and see lives impacted. We leveraged our lives in that moment for that. And we saw the Lord return that investment 100-fold. We saw lives changed, college students saved. It was hard plowing a lot of days, hard days, but it was good and a great return on investment for the kingdom. So Christian, here's the question. Are you making good or bad investments? Are you choosing yourself or this kingdom? I know there's a lot of students in here. And listen, I get it. There's that push to get to whatever the next chapter is, college, workforce, trade school, get the scholarship, play athletics at the next level, get the spouse, get the house, get the car, because it's the American dream, and that's what you're supposed to do. It's not from a Christian perspective. I would say it this way to you, young students. You are called to put yourself in a position to leverage your life however God may use it for the kingdom. That may mean seeking those things, but it's not the primary thing. Understand, this passage is not condemning wealth, it's condemning how wealth is used. It's not condemning money, it's condemning the attitude behind money. Be wise, plan for retirement, get the house, do those things, just make sure it's in the proper order there. Are you investing wisely, Christian? Second thing we see here is that foolish Christians keep what they should give. Foolish Christians keep what they should give. Maybe you have figured this out, maybe you haven't, and if you haven't, it's a news flash for you this morning. That bank account, that house, that car, that job, that scholarship, those grades, your attributes, your talents, your resources, it's not yours. It never was, it never will be. Whatever you possess in this earth is on loan from God. And one day you got to give it back and say, here's what I did with it. But I know most often my heart, just like the rich people in this passage, I come to God and I say, hey God, you've blessed me with this, this, and this, and that's great, and I'm thankful for it, and I want to use it for you, but I'm going to hold it with closed fists, and I'm going to tell you how I'm going to use it for you. God has no interest in that. Here's the thing, God does not need my resources, He does not need my talents, but He calls me to use them because He knows that's where I find my greatest satisfaction, is that when my life is fully leveraged for Jesus in every aspect. But oftentimes I look at God and tell Him what I will keep and what I will give. And God says, nah, it's all mine. May we be a people, may we be a church that says, hey God, it's all yours. Use it how you will. And you may be sitting there and say, what would He use it for? I can tell you this from the evangelism side of things in our church. Man, we have stuff popping off. We have schools opening doors. I have opportunities with teams that I can't fill because people will not sacrifice to give their time, talent, or resources. And I say that lovingly because here's the thing. I am a firm believer if we reach the schools of the upstate of South Carolina, we reach the upstate. You reach students, you reach athletes, you reach the upstate, and you change the world for it. And so that is priority one. That's what wakes me up in the morning. Man, how can we get more of our people investing and sacrificially giving? Yes, money, but also time, talent, resources, so that these students and these student athletes can see a Jesus that's worth living for. Christians, it's not yours anyways. You're not going to take it with you in the casket. You will die one day. What are you doing that really matters for eternity today? To reach the upstate and the world, we must be a people who give sacrificially. You don't believe me? Go read the book of Acts. I was thinking about this morning. The book of Acts is where the church of God is on the move in the first century. It's an amazing book, one of my favorite books. But you'll note this, almost every time there is a movement where in terms of lives are changed and the church advances and it grows, what precedes it? Sacrifice. Somebody sacrificially giving, somebody sacrificially investing, somebody sacrificially giving of their lives so that the church can grow. How does the kingdom advance? Through the sacrifice of God's people so that the world can know Him. What does this mean, though, for the person who sits in here that doesn't know Jesus? Because we talked a lot about how Christians should and should not use finances, right? For the glory of God and not for myself. Hold it open-handed instead of closed-fisted. But what about you who's sitting here and you don't know where you sit today? You don't know if you know Jesus, or maybe you do know that you don't know Jesus. How do you respond to such a passage? Well, as we said at the top, it doesn't get any better than it does right now. That's the bad news. That you're putting your hope, if you're honest with yourself, in what you can achieve in the riches of this world, in a career, in a legacy, whatever it may be, a scholarship offer, whatever that may be. And again, those are not bad things, but you've based your life on those things. And you don't need James in chapter 5 telling you that those things are fleeting, that those things are temporary. You, even the ones who don't know Jesus, you know it's not here to last. Take one look around the world around you. You know the riches of this world never last. They never fulfill. They never achieve the purpose that you feel that you have on your life. And here's why. Because it's not a life that is based on something that is a rock solid foundation of Jesus. And so if you sit in here today, understand you don't have to be a slave to riches. You don't have to be a slave to what comes next in this world and the rat race to get more. You do not have to chase after garments. You do not have to chase after riches. You do not have to put your hope in gold and silver that corrodes. But you have an opportunity to put your hope, to put your faith in one who never moves, in one who never corrodes, in one who never is taken away, but who will bring you the purpose and satisfaction you were always created for. This is why so many of us who don't know Jesus in this room, we're miserable if we pull back the curtain, because we've been searching for that which is not of this world. Yes, pursue things in this world, but primarily pursue Jesus with your life. There's a Jesus who does not move, who gives you what your heart hopes for, what you long for, what you maybe have leveraged years of your life to try and acquire. There's a good God in heaven who sees you and you're clawing in this world just to get more. And God says, I have that and even more. This is why Jesus tells us, I have come to give life, and not just life, but life abundantly. You want to find your purpose? You want to find what you were created for? Find it in the treasure that is Jesus. Jesus tells this parable about the man with hidden treasure. It's a short little parable. He tells actually that in a great price, 2 shortest parables in all of the New Testament. He says there was this man who happened upon treasure in the field. This man was living his life, living for the riches of the world, you could say, living for the moment. And he stumbles upon this treasure. And he instantly realizes that this treasure is worth more than anything he could do with his life. Well, how does the man respond? What we're told is that he goes home, he sells everything, and he buys the field so that he makes sure he has that treasure. Friends who do not know Jesus today, that treasure is Jesus. Are you willing to do whatever it takes to get that Jesus in your life? There will be no other satisfaction that you can find outside of him. No other confirmation of the purpose you are built for than to live your life for Jesus. May God move in our lives today and show us the worth and purpose that we were always created for. Would you turn from the riches of this world to the Savior who is worthy of it all? Let's pray. Jesus, I thank you for this time. I know for me, so many times I've chosen this world, even as a Christian. So many times I've chosen the riches that never deliver. And so in this passage, Lord, you called me, you call us to see resources, time, and riches for what they are. They're a tool to advance the kingdom. God, may we as Christians make wise investments for eternity. May we lay aside the trappings of the American dream and lay hold of the purpose and worth that you have set out for us. May we do whatever it takes to achieve that. God, I pray for those in here who do not know you. God, would you open their eyes today that this world has nothing of eternal value to offer them? That the riches of this world are vain and fleeting, that the garments of this world are moth-eaten, and that the gold and silver that seems so sure will corrode one day. But Jesus, you stand firm. You always deliver. And you offer to save them today. So God, I pray that you would move, that you would save those who do not know you in this moment. We ask these things in your name.